Not ready? Too bad. Head back, face forward, and hold on like you mean it.
Hello and welcome to ReviewTyme's theme Parkcast. This is a weekly show where we discuss all the ins and outs of attractions and parks from around the world. My name is Luke and I will be your host today as we jump in our time with a Y time machine and explore some Walt Disney World attractions from history that we wish we got to ride. Joining me as always is the man who was voted most likely to time travel during his senior year of 2055. It's my Review Time co-host, Dominic Lacey.
Wait, what?
Oh, sorry, that's a bit too witty, I guess, for an intro. The man voted most likely to time travel during his senior year in 2055. Oh, it's a bit witty. It's too witty. Get back to Michael Eisner level. That's too witty. It's too
duo Park. I was expecting some overwhelming pun or something weird, and then as I'm waiting for the punchline, I'm like, oh no, Luke's gotten up to the part where I need to speak. I'm like,
that was the punchline. What? What was the punchline?
I'm sorry, it was a beautiful punchline. I do like that
I'll
one.
try harder for a bad joke next time because apparently it does.
Raising the bar on the theme podcast.
Pressure's on for you next week, whatever you decide to do. But yeah, today we're doing something a little bit different. Every now and then we like to mix things up, not talk about, a park or attraction, but have a little discussion about some things. So in the past, we've done, Disneyland versus Walt Disney World. We've done the best Disney park for something. But today we're doing something a little bit different. So we're going to jump in our proverbial time machine and talk about some of the Walt Disney World attractions we wish we got the chance to ride. If you look back through history, there's some great attractions that I didn't go to Disney World for the first time until 2015 when I worked there, and you were late 90s, I think?
I went to Disney World for the first time in 1999. Now, keep in mind that I was 6 years old at the time, so that was almost, 1999 was now around 20 years ago, 21 years ago. So my recollection at the time is pretty vague. I have
it's a little rough.
You know how it happens with some memories where when you think of a certain trip, you don't think of it from your perspective. You think of it from the perspective of the pictures and the videos that you've seen.
Videos. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember this trip, but in this vague sort of way, as if it's like some clip show of my experience. I don't know
Just
what
the
it
best
is.
bits.
Is
it one of those weird clip shows where it'll be like, oh, should we get the footage of, the attraction or something? No. Here's Dom dancing in the street with nothing.
Pretty much.
There's a lot, I feel like parents, I'm sure everyone has this. If they went back to their parents' house, they would have footage of just the most pointless things. You see it even today when someone's standing there with their iPad above their head, filming Happily Ever After at the Magic Kingdom. You seriously sit there and go, are you going to watch this? And if so, why would you watch this rather than the professionally produced version that's available on YouTube? Who is this for? Realistically. The cool thing is that there is parents who film some awesome stuff over the years. So nowadays on YouTube, you'll get footage of people like, oh, here's my dad's Super 8 home video from when I went to Magic Kingdom in the 1980s. And that's the closest thing we kind of get to a time machine nowadays, to look back on the past when these attractions were, before phone cameras that are better than, what the most expensive home movie cameras were like in the 80s and 90s. So this idea of looking back through time, a lot of these attractions we're going to talk about today, I've only kind of experienced through reading articles or, a lot of, if there's a Disney TV special, chances are they've managed to rig up a really good TV camera, but it's not going to give you a full ride through it. It might only be a few snippets, a few moments here and there. But these are the rides
Like, I feel that a lot of people as well have had that experience where when you're younger, you've gone to a Disney theme park and you've seen an attraction, and some of these will become relevant as we go through our time machine journey.
Yeah.
But there were attractions that I was like, man, I really want to experience these. Unfortunately, I'm too young, but when I come back, I'll do it. And then I came back and they were gone.
They were just never there, which is a shame. But join us as we step foot into our time machine. And hey, if you're watching on YouTube, Review Time Luke and Dom channel, you can watch us physically be teleported. But our teleportation chambers look a lot like our studios. So, but that's it. We just built our time machines to look like this. And the time machine only teleports outside in front of us. So if you are watching, you won't see what we see as we ride the attraction, but you'll see our reaction. So check it out, Review Times Luke and Dom on YouTube if you'd like to see our faces.
Very complicated time machine.
Yeah, don't question it. Just know that we're doing it. And we'll jump back. We may as well go back to the park that's, in 2 months, 3 months is turning 50 years old. So we'll start.
Should we quickly mention before we go as well that we're not doing Animal Kingdom because it's too young?
Yeah, so as a quick honorary mention to Animal Kingdom, I will say Rivers of Light. Because I didn't get to experience the show, and the only reason I want to experience the show is because it was meant to open in 2015 when I was there, and it just got pushed back like 1,000 times. Remember Pandora was originally meant to open in 2015 too, and it got pushed back?
Yeah, so when I went to Walt Disney World to meet up with you in 2015, I was meant to have been able to go to Pandora. I have now since gone to Pandora. I went there for my 2019 honeymoon, so it's amazing. I know that you're very eager to get back, but I also had the thrill to experience Rivers of Light, and whilst
you're not keen to get back to that one.
Well, look, my wife loved it. I didn't. It lacked the gravitas that the other, Disney nighttime spectaculars
Which
have.
I do wonder if it's not to be like, well, we know more than you to your wife, but I wonder if it is that thing we've been lucky enough to see more Disney spectaculars around the world. So we know what the best it can be is. So when you compare it to a big selection of what Disney nighttime specs can be, it's lackluster.
I think it was essentially a mixture of a couple of things, one of them being that she's really into animals. So before she got into her current career, she wanted to be a zoologist.
Isn't Animal Kingdom her favorite park?
Yeah, but it's up there now for me as well.
Okay. See, it's my least favorite park, but I haven't been since Pandora opened, which from what I've heard completely changes the park.
Oh,
from
100%.
how it feels. Yeah.
It also makes it feel larger.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she really liked Rivers of Light. I think it's also one of those things where it was a far more tame nighttime spectacular.
Yeah.
It was a lot more relaxing. You didn't have to wait the ridiculous hours to get a good spot. You could just sort of rock
the
up
setup's nice.
and see it. Yeah, and
That
it's
amphitheater?
It had cool elements, but I don't know. It just failed to wow me, especially when you go from things like, Phantasmic and Happily Ever After and Illuminations. All of those are like big, hard-hitting, intense nighttime spectaculars. Rivers of Light to me was just another show. You could have put that in any park and it would have been the same.
Yeah, and that's always the difficulty of that park where they can't use fireworks and stuff like that. But World of Color proved that they know how to do a show without gratuitous fireworks and still make it spectacular. But the fact that it's cancelled after like 3 years of operation means that Disney realized that it wasn't quite working. So that I'm guessing they were going back to the drawing board. That cost them a lot of money to build that amphitheater, stuff like that. I'm sure eventually we'll see some form of nighttime spectacular at this park again, but that's my honorary mention for Animal Kingdom. But we'll go back, as we said, to the park that started it all, the Magic Kingdom. Dom, you can ride one attraction at the Magic Kingdom. What would it be?
I would like to ride extraterrestrial. And this goes back to what I was saying before, is that
I think we might have mentioned this exact fact like 20 times too. We will never stop talking about how much we wish we could experience extraterrestrial.
Yeah, half of our listeners who are frequent, they've just gone, oh God, not this again.
Rolled the eyes.
But for me, it was one of those attractions that I went there in 1999 and I was too young for extraterrestrial. Yeah. They wouldn't let me on. It was around the time when they were like, "Whoa, too spooky," and understandably so. It was a horrifying attraction. But
it would probably be your least favorite attraction of all time if you did get the chance to ride it. You would not be wishing so fondly of it.
Well, I remember the stories. Like, one of the incredible things about that attraction was that coming home from the Magic Kingdom, that was the attraction that my family talked about. That was the one that they were in the car. Yeah, so my brother and my sister and my dad, that's the one that they still reminisce on. Like, oh, do you remember that attraction where you would go into the laboratory and then they put down the harnesses and their recollection of it is fairly vague, but they were saying like you'd have the hose swing past, the everything dripping on you, and hearing a first-hand experience about them being able to actually witness this attraction when I know so much about it from the work that I do with Review Time is just amazing, because it sort of gives me that first-hand, visceral sort of experience that which I just can't get through POVs.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with Magic Kingdom as a whole, I feel. The reason that would stand out for a lot of people, in my opinion, is, people say, oh, well, Magic Kingdom's a baby's park. It's only got rides for kids. Which, when you look in deep enough into it, it's kind of true. Whether that's a bad thing or not to you is going to be dependent on you and what you're after. So to me, I love the Magic Kingdom because I love that feeling of, the holistic family atmosphere of Haunted Mansion. It's not my favorite theme park in the world because of reasons like that, but I could imagine someone who that is so different to the Magic Kingdom from when it was there that would stand out easily in your mind, whether it be because you thought it was really cool or whether because you thought it was terrifying. It's still going to stick with you.
Do you know what I think would have kept it around a little bit longer? And I feel like most of our listeners know enough about extraterrestrial that we don't have to go into the whole experience. For those that don't know, if you are somehow coming across our very niche
before terrestrial,
for those that don't know, it was basically a show in which you were harnessed into an experience, and then there was an alien which broke out of this tube and sort of terrorized guests, and it had practical effects where it was as if the alien was sort of stepping on your harness. It would like breathe on your neck, it would drip on you and dribble. It had 3D binaural audio and all
blood
that.
At one point, right? Somebody died. Like a cast member was apparently up the top shining a flashlight. They would get killed by the alien and you would get splattered with water, but it was meant to be their blood.
Yeah, and it would drip on you, and it was incredible. But one of the things about it, and I think what would have saved it, is if you just had a little bit more time to work the audience up to it and to really just be like, this is not your average experience, to rework the show so that we don't have to go into the territory of Stitch. However, I still feel that you can have scary Stitch. You don't have to have cutesy, silly Stitch. You can still have it in sort of the same situation.
I feel even if it was at Hollywood Studios or Disneyland or one of those other parks, I feel it would still be around today. Well, maybe not because of the IP-ing of Chapek, but other than that, I feel it'd still be around today because the only reason it kind of disappeared was this was the family park. This is in the park that has a small world. This is in the park that, doesn't really have any of the kind of, look at Disneyland. It still has Star Tours. It still has Indiana Jones Adventure. Those are a lot more thrilling than anything you'll find at the Magic Kingdom, where at Walt Disney World, those got kicked to other parks, Star
Yeah.
Tours is at Hollywood Studios sort of thing. If it was
It's-
at any other park, I could maybe see it around today.
Though I'm noticing now that there is a criticism against the Magic Kingdom that it doesn't have enough for the whole family, that it has oriented too much towards the sort of child experience and
I feel
the
that
deep into
Tron is trying to answer that.
Exactly. So
One
that's
attraction's
what
not going to answer it, but I feel that's why Tron.
the two primary thrill rides are now right next to each other, which I find
Yeah.
hilarious. But that's
Space
enough
Mountain
talking about
And fake
extraterrestrial.
Space Mountain.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Space Mountain and its successor.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Space Mountain, mine's kind of close because right next to Space Mountain used to be the entrance to what is still in my mind an attraction I don't believe kind of existed because it seems so weird to me. The Skyways that used to exist at pretty much every Magic Kingdom park.
Yes.
Like, to me, the fact that Disney does so much to hide sight lines and all this, but there used to be an attraction that would just take you up so you could see all the backstage anyway, seems so bizarre to me. But I would have loved to have ridden this, especially when, you know, you had things like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea Lagoon. Like, imagine looking down on all of that. This, I feel, is kind of a forgotten attraction for a lot of people. But just height. Height in a theme park is so cool to me because you can see so much.
It also added one of those incredible elements when you look at videos where just having that sort of horizon brought up with the moving elements like the kinetics, we've talked about them before. Kinetics being that sort of feeling
Movement,
of
really,
movement within a space. And that's what this did. It really created that sense of a living, breathing kingdom. It's something that as they move on, sort of Disney seemed to be really enjoying putting things inside boxes and making sure that
Which is
it's
a shame.
enclosed. And
Especially like Tomorrowland. The whole like idea of Disneyland Tomorrowland, you know, in the 60s, that tomorrow on the move, beautiful kinetics. And those were carried over to Magic Kingdom with things like the Skyway, the People Mover, Autopia, the Astro Orbiter, the Space Jets. Like all of that had it. And one positive to Tron is that, sure, it's half the ride's built in a big, disgusting box, but there is that part that goes out. And I'm hoping that kind of revitalizes some of the kinetics that were lost with things like the Skyway. So the Skyway used to take you from Tomorrowland Station, which is right next to the Space Mountain today. If you go to the toilets next to Space Mountain or the bathrooms next to Space Mountain, it used to be on the second floor of that building.
yeah.
And it takes you over to where nowadays the Tangled restrooms are. So if you can draw an imaginary line between those two locations, it was a sky bucket, so, you know, high up in the air, taking you between those two locations. Just as much really of a nice view attraction as it was actual transport. You could probably walk it quicker than waiting in the queue. But if I got the chance to go back, I would love to ride that because, number one, it's probably the best ride to give you an overview of what the entire park would have been like at that period of time.
Yeah, it was just like, it's very romanticized and it sort of harks back to the original days of Walt Disney just having a fascination for transportation.
Yeah.
Remember
He's
that.
the king of kinetics. And
Oh,
Bob
100%.
Gurr's the one who made it happen. Like,
Remember-
them two together, the godfathers of kinetics in theme parks.
Remember that at one point you had the Skyway at Disneyland with the monorail, with the train, with the People Mover, like
The submarines
yeah,
as well.
he
Autopia.
loved
Like, and
his-
all of those were out in the open, like movement-based attractions. Like, that's crazy. I would have loved to have seen that. And I think, did they also have at that point, like the Skyjets, the Starjets, somewhere closer to the middle than they are now? You know how nowadays they're right at the entrance to Tomorrowland, the Astro Orbiter? I believe it used to be further back, which would give you even more kinetics.
Yeah.
Like, incredible stuff. But yeah, that would be our two. I feel those are two good choices. And anytime throughout this episode, if you'd like to tell us your choice for what you would go back in time for those parks, get in touch with us on Twitter at Tyme Review. We'd love to hear your answer. But jumping from the Magic Kingdom, its birthday coming up soon on the 1st of October. Guess who else's birthday is on the 1st of October? Epcot, because they opened on the same day, 11 years apart. So opening up the future, remember, 21st century begins the 1st of October, 1982. I'll start this time. So if I could go back in time to Epcot, the home to big, dark ride, 20-minute long, impressive dark rides. To me, the one that I'd love to do most, and there's two I was tossing up between. I'd be interested to see if yours was the other one. But my one, Journey into Imagination. The original Journey into Imagination. The Tony Baxter banger of an attraction. The Dreamfinder. The original non-annoying Figment. On an almost 20-minute ride into imagination. This idea where if I was to say to you, you know, what's a ride about imagination like? Half of people's brains would explode before they figured out what the ride would be. It's not like, oh, the history of transport or the history of communication. Imagination. Good luck, Tony Baxter. Figure it out, essentially. And figure it out he did, because this ride looks amazing.
Oh, 100%. You look at ride-throughs of this attraction, and it's exactly what you think of when you think, what would you have if you could just have a journey through imagination? That's exactly what it is. I know that a lot of people give the current version of this attraction a lot of criticism, and well-deserved, because they went, hey, let's take this attraction, which is all about the ins and outs and the exciting nature of imagination, and then let's go over here and let's change it to be a science lab exploring imagination. Like, how sterile can you get with that?
Yeah.
Like, you literally have free reign to do whatever you want, and you put in a laboratory?
And then you put the Mr. Monty Python himself there and be like, oh, wow, Eric Idle. That's what we've needed for our Figment-based, imagination-based attraction. And remember the original, like not the original version, but the between version that only existed for like a couple of years, where he would essentially tell the guests they had no imagination.
Yes.
Which might be the complete opposite of what the original ride was trying to do.
So
like,
the problem
celebrate
with that
the imagination
was that they basically wanted to be like, oh, this attraction is going to fix their imagination. But from just fresh out of the gates, they just go, oh, their imagination is riddled with TV and all this. And it's like,
bullying the right. Like, could you imagine if you went on to like, let's say, oh, okay, you're going to be the contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Play It. And then the host was like, okay, joining us today is Dominic Lacey from Australia. He's an idiot with an IQ of 20. Let's see if we can fix that here on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Like, it doesn't make sense to insult your guests as the first thing they see. Compare this to the original Journey into Imagination, where the first thing you see is one of the coolest scenes technologically for the time, where there was essentially a giant turntable and your ride vehicle would partner up with one of the 4 animatronic Figment Dreamfinders on the Dream Machine, the Dreammobile Dreamcatcher, and like your attraction vehicle would follow it around to give it this long extended scene that wouldn't be possible normally in a dark ride if the scene didn't follow you and you didn't stop. And just then you go into kind of the dream port, which is this idyllic, crazy, essentially bringing the imagination to life in a way that amazing Imagineers like Tony Baxter and Steve Kirk could be the only ones to do. And to me, this, the One Little Spark song is iconic still today, even though I never rode the original because I try to bring it back in. But it was just, 12 minutes of, you kind of felt like you're on a trip, I guess. But hey, that's what Epcot did well in the early days. If I could go back to Epcot, this ride only lasted like 15 years or something, which is almost a travesty for how amazing this ride was to only last for that long.
Yeah.
But what about you, Dom? What will be your back in time?
I'm going to give a quick honorary mention before we get into it because I have ridden it, but it's sort of been a while since I have, back from that trip in 1999, and this is Original Test Track. I love Original Test Track. I think that, I don't... Yeah, like the whole sort of atmosphere of going into this, even though I just dissed it before, but going into a laboratory because it makes sense in this context.
Yeah.
But where they're sort of talking about, how cars are actually manufactured and tested, it felt true to its form. I feel like Test Track now, the idealistic Tron Track version is just sort of it. It's neat. I don't have any hate towards this attraction.
I like it, but I agree the original version looks better, in my opinion, and truer to Epcot.
Yeah. Whereas Tron Track just felt like they needed to update it for the sake of updating it. But the actual
isn't
attraction...
that how Journey into Imagination got closed as well?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. There's a trend.
I love that thing about Journey into Imagination as well, where you look at it and the way that they managed to cut down the ride time was they literally just cut it in half.
Cut the ride track in half. There you go. How do we save money? Just do that. Kodak, imagine being a company and having the power at this point. So Kodak, the company who sponsored it at the time, having the power to go, we want a new ride. But we don't want to pay much money for it. But give us a new ride anyway, please.
I think, weren't they contractually obligated to...
It was I think it was the thing where it's every 15 years or 10 years or something. And it happened a lot in early Epcot. That's why a lot of these attractions didn't last for a super long time. You had the contractual obligation that if you wanted to continue to sponsor the attraction, you had to fund a refurbishment of the attraction that had to be of a certain scale.
It was to try and counteract the tomorrow problem, I believe, where it's like you don't want the attractions in what is called Future World to eventually become Past World, which is what it's become now.
You mean the celebration of the past? Now it's just become world because we've got Nemo, Flight Simulator 2020, You Have No Imagination Land, Tron Track, Space,
Go to Mars,
Spinner, and you're gonna soon have Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Ooh, future. Ooh, God knows. Tomorrow, yesterday, the past, nothing.
Aren't they meant to be changing Epcot to sort of...
The new lands, there's like world celebration, world discovery, and so there won't be Future World anymore, but changing the names of the areas doesn't change the problem that's at the heart. Calling Tomorrowland Whoopsie Daisy Land doesn't fix the problems that land has at its core.
Unless it's Discovery Land, in which you can just plop it down and go, yep, this is Retro Future Land. It's like,
forever.
It's a smart solution to that problem. But the attraction that I actually do want to experience myself, and I will say, and I'll preface this by saying that I don't know a whole lot about this attraction outside of the videos that I've seen. So it's sort of history and all of that. I know why it ended up becoming defunct, and I'm sure a lot of people can guess what it is, but it's Horizons.
If you can dream it, then you can do it.
See, those are the things that I don't know.
Well, that's the famous theme song, which always gets attributed to Walt Disney, quote, but he never said it. If you've ever seen a website say, if you can dream it, then you can do it, Walt Disney, it's wrong. That quote was created for this attraction.
Have you ever seen that the weird thing that sort of Disney did with Walt after he passed away, where they turned him into essentially a character? Like they removed the, I hate using the word problematic too much because, you know, it doesn't necessarily apply to Walt Disney, but they removed the parts of him that made him human, you know, the the points where he was angry.
The smoking, the stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, and they just they put all of these stuff that were never attributed to him, and they were like, look at this story and listen to this amazing quote, or we'll write this on and say it's from Walt Disney, when they didn't happen.
Well, even today, they still attribute the whole Disneyland to Walt sitting at the park watching his daughters on the carousel, ignoring the fact that he had been looking into stuff like the Mickey Mouse Park next to his studio in Burbank for like 10 years before that. But no, it's a nice magical story to just say the Griffith Park carousel sort of thing. And it's the same where if you look at the way Walt Disney actually was, he would hate the idea of the partners statue. But now it's become synonymous and iconic to the Disney brand, even though the name the Disney brand is named after would not like it. He didn't like the idea of himself being this, look at me, I'm the center of attention. And that's what the partner statue is in the Disney theme parks.
There are lots of things that I think Disney would look back on and be like, no.
What are you doing?
Stop that. But I guess that comes from the perspective of, you can't have your entire basis of a company situated around a person that isn't going to be glorified eventually. Yeah. So it's one of those things you've got.
They become a character that you can sell, essentially. Yeah. Even things like his signature not really being his signature, being a characterized, cleaned up, fancified version of his signature. Those sort of things. You kind of, that's what you expect, I guess, over time. If Review Time, in 100 years, when people are looking back at Review Time, they'll think that we were the best dudes ever. I didn't have a beard right now. You didn't have a balding head right now. We were perfect. Okay? Perfect.
It becomes a thing when we are running our multi-billion-dollar theme park reviewing conglomerate with stations all around the world. Theme parks dread us. Our opinion can make or break a brand new theme park. We've got our own parks as well, purely comprised of the data that we have from reviewing other theme parks.
We know how to do perfect parks.
They're the only ones that we surprisingly give 10 out of 10 for.
But behind the scenes, we're still just being like, you're Michael Eisner and you're Stu Duo Park. But we've got this facade of this very professionalism, front and center idea of these scary men you don't want to come to your theme park and review it.
Someone goes back and all of our podcasts are edited, so we have a really posh accent and we're wearing suits.
It's the same content. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Theme Parkcast.
Oh, yes, welcome. Let's talk about Horizons
it's
a little
more. The man
more.
who once drank tea from a mug. Can you believe it? My Review Time co-host, Dominic Lacey.
One time I didn't have the china without the saucer.
Disgusting. Oh, you are naughty boy.
Oh, naughty.
Well, this has been a pretty on-track podcast so far. So that was a little taste of the normality that ends up.
Deviation. But yeah, just quickly talking about Horizons. Horizons I've mostly experienced through videos. I've watched I forget who it is. You might be able to find out, but there's a really good HD master of a film that someone did, like a full ride through of Horizons. And there's a story, it was by the person who recently did the feature film for the Defunct Land, but it's the story.
Matthew Serrano.
Yes, who talked about the two guys who would break into Horizons and, the formula in which.
Wild story. I believe it's called Please Remain Seated.
Yeah.
By Matthew Serrano. If you haven't seen that, if I could recommend one theme park video to watch that isn't our own, it's probably that. That is a spectacular video.
And
the channel you're talking about
punches you in the heart right at the end.
It's sad. The one you're thinking about is Retro WDW. They do some incredible remastering of old footage to stabilize it, bring it up, fix the colors up. And for some of these attractions, this is the closest you'll ever get to riding it nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those attractions where, sure, I don't know heaps about it. I just want to ride it because it brings me back to those classic days of Epcot when it was just about physical sets.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick little rundown of the attraction just from what I know about it. Horizons, for those of you who don't know, was set to essentially be the sequel to Carousel of Progress. So it's following the same family from Carousel of Progress, but through the history. So it looks back at what people thought tomorrow would be. So looking at, Jules Verne and stuff like that, and them thinking, what's the future going to be? What's it going to look like? Then you moved into these giant wraparound screens, which were spectacular for the time. Like, think of Soarin' type ride system where it encapsulates you, but like 15, 20 years before Soarin'. So, and then, you've got all these scenes that are animatronic-led scenes looking at what, stuff might look like in the future. What's farming going to look like in the future? What's, are people going to live underwater? What's an underwater city going to look like? And it looked at these different places, and then the final was you could pick where you wanted to go. So essentially it was just this really cool Omni-Mover dark ride, but like, a 15-minute long packed with animatronics. Kind of the last surviving one is Spaceship Earth, I would say. But where Spaceship Earth is all about communication, Horizons was kind of about, looking to the future. It was the most Future World attraction, I feel, from Future World when it opened. It opened a year after the park because it was delayed originally. And this only operated for like 12 years.
Yeah, it wasn't around for long.
With how amazing this ride looks.
It had that problem as well where the sponsor just wasn't willing to upkeep it. And apparently, from what I've heard, it is an unbelievably expensive attraction, or it was an unbelievably expensive attraction to run. The other thing as well is I believe that they found that it was on top of a sinkhole. Like the attraction.
They've said that a lot. And a lot of people have kind of been like, maybe not. I think it might have been that weird thing where it was like, yes, but it wasn't a huge risk to the ride system because they did a thing where they originally closed it and then they were like, we can't reopen it because it's in a sinkhole. And then like a year later, they did reopen it when Test Track was down and they needed a ride over that side because Test Track and Ellen's Energy Adventure were both down to get their new versions of the attraction. So they reopened it anyway, and people were like, wait, wasn't this built on a sinkhole? Forget about that.
Yeah, just ignore that part. That gigantic hole in the attraction, just ignore that.
Yeah.
The other thing I find absolutely fascinating about the removal of this attraction is the fact that they didn't remove anything beyond the big expensive parts. Like when it came to the set pieces and that, they just demolished it. There are pictures of...
And they're gut-wrenching pictures as a theme park fan of just them tearing the building apart with a digger.
Apparently, there was that thing that would happen where when an attraction was about to go, management would go to Imagineering and be like, attractions getting demolished, take what you want.
And then they just demolish the ride after it. I think the one of the big things where it was like if you're a big Imagineer was the devils from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at the Magic Kingdom. Those were like a status symbol of I'm an important enough Imagineer to have one of the 12 or whatever it is Mr. Toad devils.
Because it was one of those situations, I've heard Jim Hill talking about it, where when an attraction
closes...
closes...
He hasn't had a shout out for a while. Our boy, the Jim
Disney
Hill and Len Tester.
Jim was talking about it, and he was saying that the only Imagineers that could get time off to go and experience attractions such as that were, the big influential ones who could go, I need to head over to Florida for a week.
To see it. Yeah. But I think Epcot could honestly, looking at this time travel list, Epcot might be the one where almost every cancelled, like non-existent attraction anymore, I wish I could ride.
Yeah.
So this was probably the best one. Over to a park that doesn't really have too much that has been closed over time. I can think of a few things, but not many that I didn't get the chance to ride. Lucky last for today, Disney MGM Studios, Disney Hollywood Studios, depending on when you're talking about it. What is it for you? It's your turn first.
Disney Junior live on stage.
But Dom, we did experience that.
Oh, true. How
Don't
could
you
I
mean
forget?
Playhouse Disney live on stage? The
sorry.
same show with a different name? Because I think Playhouse Disney might have had a roly-poly-oly.
Oh, that's true. Sorry. I'll go back. So,
what's your second choice?
The attraction that I really want to experience, and this is another one that I'm like, I'm not sure whether I actually experienced this or not, it's the Tram Tour. Yeah,
we picked the same one.
Shocked. Everyone's like, oh, what? Yeah. but for me, this is one of those attractions where I know that because the backlot wasn't really used for anything, that the Tram Tour doesn't really mean much.
The Bette Midler Lottery film. Yeah. Don't forget Bette Midler Lottery, the film literally made to show that they could film films on the location.
When they were literally like forcing companies, they'd be like, you are contractually obligated to use our back lot. If you do not, you don't get a film. When Eisner was like, please come and film in Florida, and everyone's like, that's really
Why would
inconvenient.
I do that? Yeah.
Why would I remove myself from the entire industry? But anyway, so the thing about this attraction is I was there. I think it closed in 2014 or early 2015.
It closed like a week before I got to Walt Disney World.
And everything was still there. I remember we went to...
Even 9 months later when you came to visit me, it was all still standing. Like they could literally have just reopened the ride the next day and not, needed to do any big changes.
Well, the queue became a Star Wars shop. I seem to vaguely remember.
Yeah, at one point.
I was like, okay.
The load, like where you loaded onto the trams, it became a Star Wars store for Star Wars weekends. And then they just kind of kept it after that because it was well themed enough to be a store. So yeah, at one point you could walk to the old load building and shop for lightsabers.
And you could go to the area where you could look out and see the sort of concrete turnaround. And there was still the props from, I think there was one from... Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and there were all of those just hanging out.
There's the ship from Flight of the Navigator, I think, was there. And they were all just chilling there, rotting away in the Floridian sun. But the big thing about the studio tour is, depending on what time we travel to, we can ride a completely different ride. Because the studio tour went through so many changes over the years. To me, the one I wish I got to experience was that first one. The 4-hour experience where it was pretty much all you did that day that you went. It was like that, the Great Movie Ride, and Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. It would start with the tram tour. Then there was like a walking tour part. Then you'd like get back on the tram for it. Like to call this an attraction, it's not really because it's kind of more an experience. But just this idea that one thing was pretty much your entire day at the park is crazy to me.
Yeah, and it was just like a lot of people attribute that to just the tram tour. But one of the things that people forget is they had the water special effects show at the start. And then they had the other special effects elements. And you would literally like go from one bit to another. You would walk from each one in a group. And as you said, it was like 4 hours, the entire experience. The tram tour only being a very small part of it. It all sort of led up to that. If I remember correctly, they actually had a spot in the middle where you could go to the loo.
Yeah, so there was the part, I believe, that became Streets of America was at one point was like a drive-through part, and then very shortly after they changed it to be a walkthrough where the studio backlot, what's that called? There's like there's the kind of, it used to be there next to the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids play set. There was like real trash food option, which I believe that was like you're halfway, have a burger, use the loo. Okay, get back, like finish the rest of the tour now. Because I think that was somewhere around there. But yeah, there's this idea to me that, and then you could get on it and then you'd actually watch them animate. Because in the later years, they didn't really do anything at the studio. But at the start, they kind of forced things at the studio. So you could walk through the magic of Disney animation and actually watch them animate films such as Lilo and Stitch. Not fake, like for the theme park audience, but actually be animating the film by hand.
Remember as well, like, I know that there's a lot of controversy, and I'll just quickly skip over this because I think there's too much to talk about for just one episode. But they're currently moving the entire Imagineering division from California to Florida, and that's what they did with the animators back in that day. Like, they were like, all right, you're moving from Burbank, you're going to work in our theme park. Yeah. And there are going to be people who are going to stare at you. Which, if you haven't watched this week's video of Review Time that comes out tomorrow, if you're listening to this as soon as it launches, it is actually looking at another plan that they had to move the animation facility to somewhere else in Burbank. So they like this Burbank campus of Disney, which I've driven past before, and it is a mega thing. They've always had this, how do we expand here sort of thing. But yeah, that's a big old topic, and I feel really bad for anyone being forced to essentially make a decision between their job and the rest of their life. Yeah. But yeah, this is a new Disney, for better and for worse, what we're seeing currently. But this is Chapek's Disney, as we say in the biz.
Yep. But yeah, the studio tour and any of its incarnations would have been cool. I know I rag on studio theme parks a lot, but I still love that feel of like the special effects. You know, shows I used to love, you know, Mythbusters. I used to love watching the behind the scenes on DVDs because of this idea of how a practical effects done. And because these parks used to showcase so much of that, that's why they used to be so cool to me. Now I can see
your practical effects, the things like Catastrophe Canyon and all of that, they were always very cool because, one of my favorite things, I know you've talked about it as well, is in the Tram Tour in Universal Studios Hollywood, where they've got the earthquake scene. That's cool. Great. Like, so many of those things are just very neat.
And that was one of the first, if you look back, the studio tours have been a thing for quite a while. That earthquake was actually one of the first studio tour editions that wasn't just, here's how we make the film, but literally sit there and just experience it. It was the closest thing to a ride Universal Hollywood had at that time, because it wasn't this, well, here's how we make it. It was, here's 3 minutes of insanity evolving around you. And I feel that feeling can never be emulated on a screen or anything like that.
No, that entire sort of you become the camera sensation, that's what I love. Especially you get that within Catastrophe Canyon, where it's like, where do I look? There's so much happening. Even though I feel like Catastrophe Canyon is one of the more lackluster of those physical attractions, because it just seems to be, it's very quick.
And it's that feel that's, even though it's one of the worst, it's kind of one of the only ones still around, at least the one in Paris where they kill a truck instead.
Yeah, true.
There's also, I believe, Universal Hollywood still does have the earthquake, the big one, on their studio Tram Tour, which is still one of the highlights of that thing, even though it's one of the oldest things still surviving on the tour. But I think that will do it. We've gotten in our time machine. If you would like to tell us where you would go in our time machine, or where you would like to see the Review Time with a Y time machine go next, whether that be to Disneyland, Tokyo Disney, let us know. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at ReviewTime Luke.
I'm at ReviewTime Tom.
You can get us both at Time Review or at ReviewTime everywhere else. If you haven't, give us a little rating on iTunes, wherever you're listening to the show. It really does help us out. You guys have been loving season 2, so thank you to everyone who's been listening. We've seen huge increases in viewership since we've started this season, and we greatly appreciate it. We will be back next week. I think it's time for a theme park next week, Dom.
Ooh.
Any ideas what it might be?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the opposite of Universal Ocean.
Ooh, Small River. We'll be back next week with our episode on Small River. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
See ya.
Review Time's theme podcast is brought to you by Luke Carroll and Dominic Lacey. A big shout out goes to our newest Patreons, Dia Han, long-term Patreon, Martine Lurigerson, and to you, the listener. Review Time's theme podcast will be back next week.